Exposed, the incredible 5-blind date that transformed a single dad CEO's life forever. John sat alone in the bustling diner, the neon lights buzzing as memories from the past collided with his present. Regardless of his title as CEO, the weight of his responsibilities pressed hard on his shoulders, his startup clinging to a thread while his daughter, Emily, navigated the tumultuous waters of adolescence. This blind date, set up by his well-meaning coworker, felt more like a distraction from reality than a spark of hope. The aroma of fried food filled the air, but all he could think about was the looming board meeting that threatened every hard-fought gain he had made. Across the table sat Sarah, a fellow single mother whose dreams seemed as tattered as his. They laughed at their mutual predicament, as stories poured out over greasy burgers and milkshakes. The connection was immediate and electric, both drawn into the gravity of shared burdens. She spoke vividly about her art, a world of color and creativity in stark contrast to his monotonous grind of meetings and spreadsheets. But deep within, alongside the budding hope, John felt a gnawing unease. How could he allow himself to be captivated when his life was unraveling at the seams? Just as Sarah's enthusiasm ignited a sliver of joy, the thought of the board meeting crashed into his mind like a freight train. An endless spiral of anxiety rushed over him. What if the board pushed him toward savage cuts? Layoffs that would leave families in the lurch? His heart raced. The uneasy balance of work and ethics seemed to tip perilously. As Sarah's words transformed into a soothing background hum, he realized how far detached he had become from integrity, the values he promised to uphold long ago. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. His thoughts soon spiraled into a tumultuous chaos, Sarah's laughter fading into a quiet storm of dread crushing his spirit. He stared intently at the untouched milkshake, his appetite crushed by guilt and desperation. A flicker of hope ignited every time he heard her passion for canvases and colors, yet it was extinguished by the reality of corporate ruthlessness ready to swallow him whole. Each slice of vulnerability opened up before him, revealing not just a longing for freedom but a profound crisis of identity. As the evening waned, a call from Emily shattered his momentary escape. A problem at school loomed, one that yanked him right back into the whirlpool of responsibilities he fought endlessly to juggle. Torn between comforting his daughter and fighting against his board's draconian demands, John felt paralyzed. Would he dare confront the board armed with the truth, or would he cave to their pressures in a world where compassion often took a back seat? Every fiber of his being screamed for change, yet the familiar grip of fear wrapped around him. The diner light dimmed in his rearview mirror as he drove home, thoughts whirring wildly. He had crossed into unfamiliar territory during that date, but could he redirect the course of his life, or was he too late? As tension built to a crescendo, he found himself at a crossroads, realizing that the most significant fight of his life awaited him, one that could redefine everything he ever stood for. The silence in John's dimly lit living room weighed heavily like a shroud. The familiar sights, the well-worn couch, the toys scattered across the floor, held no comfort. Instead, they served as stark reminders of the life he was suffocating under. Flipping through Emily's school papers, the colorful drawings her small hands created felt like an oasis in a desert of uncertainty. Yet, as he gazed at their vibrancy, a dark shadow murmured of failure and sacrifice. That he felt the comforting weight of her upcoming school play, a performance where she yearned for the glow of parental pride. Yet, behind every warm thought lay the frigid reality of the board meeting. He could almost hear the collective whispers of judgment and skepticism creeping back into his mind, a cacophony that threatened to close off every escape route. In the days that followed the date, the initial spark of connection with Sarah lingered like an ember, igniting faint hopes of revitalizing his spirit. Those conversations about art, a realm he had long since dismissed in his pursuit of corporate success, pounded against his conscience. With every recollection, he felt the walls around him begin to crack, a reminder that he was still capable of feeling deeply, of being more than just a cog in a corporate machine, but now came the time for action. It burned in his chest like a furnace, fueling a newfound determination. Compromise after compromise with the board seemed to weave an inescapable web, threading personal ethics into a tangled mess of corporate strategy. John could sense the collective hesitance of his leadership team, fear-driven decisions creeping into their discussions, overshadowing the vision they once shared. But he also knew their loyalty was tied to his courage. Decision time approached, and unbidden thoughts of Sarah flashed through his mind, her laughter, her passion. Those were things that once made life bearable. The specter of his role as CEO posed an unyielding challenge. He didn't want to just survive, he wanted to define what his legacy would be. Could he stand before his board not just as a businessman, but as a leader who stood for something profound? As the snow fell outside his window, light danced on the surfaces, bringing a momentary illusion of tranquility. John put his thoughts into action, drafting a new proposal that pushed against every painful instinct telling him to play it safe. He wanted more transparency in the company culture, a commitment to ethical practices that put people before profit. He could feel the fear like a snake coiling around his heart, ready to strike, but he was willing to entertain this terrifying notion of vulnerability. Thus, he made the choice to invite his team to participate in this vision. He called a meeting with those who shared the boardroom, but more importantly, those who shared the everyday weight of the company. He needed to unite them behind a cause larger than survival. Do you want to be remembered as the team that saved the company by sacrificing people? John questioned, his heart pounding in rhythm with his resolve. This was the moment. The conversation sparked surprise, then debate, then fervent support blossomed among the team. Every voice echoed in a surge of empowerment, and John could feel their collective strength tying them closer together, a movement built on integrity, accountability, and courage. They debated ideas, and slowly, the fear that held them captive began to dissolve into a shared understanding. But just as momentum surged, the door creaked open, revealing a figure shadowed in uncertainty, one of the board members who had been the fiercest proponent of cuts. Tension escalated. Would this be the confrontation they had all been waiting for, or merely a patch on a facade that was corrupt at its core? The board meeting loomed large on the horizon, and with it, the weight of resolve would either propel him forward or plunge him back into despair. John couldn't help but think, was he truly ready for the battle ahead? The hour of reckoning beckoned, and within him, a restless anxiety, mixed with unyielding hope, churned. The storm was coming, and it promised to change everything. John stood at the precipice of uncertainty, his palms slick with sweat as he glanced around the conference room filled with his leadership team. The air buzzed with anticipation, and though their faces were smeared with doubt, he sensed a flicker of hope buried beneath the anxiety. It was time to confront the cogs of their corporate machine, a system teetering on a precarious edge of ethics and profit. The board member who had just entered the room, Gerald, was notorious for his bone-chilling pragmatism. He had long championed the notion of cutting the dead weight, a phrase that had echoed through their previous meetings like a warning bell. John's thoughts tumbled as Gerald took his seat, each tick of the clock amplifying the tension within him. "Let us welcome Gerald," John said, his voice even despite the tumult inside. He couldn't allow his undercurrent of fear to surface. He needed to reclaim the authority of a leader who believed in people over numbers. As the discussion commenced, Gerald wasted no time. "I hope we're still on track to rid ourselves of the unnecessary expenses," he stated bluntly, the corners of his lips curling ever so slightly at the thought of his impending proposals. "We need to ensure the bottom line doesn't bleed." The energy in the room pulsed with restlessness. The initial embers of unity and resolve that John had kindled now flickered uncertainly. Did they truly want to sacrifice their colleagues for profit? It was this fundamental question that sat at the heart of the debate, a moral dilemma only he had the agency to address. "Gerald," John interjected, steadying his breath, "what is a healthy bottom line if it's built on the devastation of our team? What kind of leadership do we want to embody?" The room went silent, all eyes darting back and forth between the two men. John's heart raced. Could he really steer this meeting into uncharted waters? Was he prepared to face the inevitable fallout? Gerald glared, but, to John's surprise, his tension turned to curiosity. And what alternative do you propose? We can't expect to thrive if we continue to operate with emotional idealism. John's stomach churned. Could he articulate this burgeoning vision amidst this battle of wills? He shifted in his seat, grounding himself in the clarity that had been born in recent weeks. We can thrive by ensuring a workplace that values our employees. Yes, we need to tighten our belts, but we want our values. No more layoffs. Instead, let us invest in reskilling our people for the new markets we're entering. The faces around the table began to shift, some nodding slowly, others furrowed brows deep in thought. John seized this flicker of positivity to frame his thoughts. We are stronger, more resilient, when we work together, linking arms rather than severing them. We lose our identity if we cast aside those who have dedicated years to this company. He felt a tremor in his own voice, but as he spoke, a sense of passionate purpose began to bloom within him. This was more than a professional gambit, it was personal, a message that resonated with the father he was, the man he wanted to become. As discussions wore on, Gerald's facade cracked slightly, revealing a hesitant curiosity. He opened the floor to a vote on a temporary employee development pilot program. John sensed the tide beginning to turn. But just as he breathed in the air of potential victory, a soft chime interrupted them, the unmistakable ring of his phone. Glancing furtively, he noticed it was Emily's school, a number he rarely had to answer during work hours. His heart hammered against his chest. Would this moment derail everything he fought for today? What urgent call required his attention now? His stomach knotted tighter as he made the split-second decision to answer. He wanted to know if the call meant a threat to his professional ambitions, or a pivotal shake-up to his life. John's instincts, honed from years spent juggling responsibilities, braced him for the whirlwind ahead. The outcome had the power to redefine everything, both at work and at home. He exhaled slowly, bracing for the inevitable storm. "Hello?" He finally answered, steeling himself for whatever news awaited him next. "Mr. Thompson?" "This is Mrs. Wilson from Emily's school," the voice on the line said, crisp and professional yet laced with an undercurrent of concern. John's heart sank. The last time he received a call like this, it had ended with Emily in the hospital after a nasty fall at recess. "Is everything all right?" he managed to ask, his throat tightening. "We need to discuss a situation that arose during today's school hours. It's about Emily." The words felt heavy in the pit of his stomach. As he listened, time seemed to unravel. Emily had been involved in a minor altercation with another student, a throwing incident during gym class. Under normal circumstances, this might not have warranted a call, but it quickly became apparent that there was more to it. His daughter had become upset afterward, hiding in the nurse's office, claiming that her friends had left her out. His initial instinct was to lash out at the school system, to demand accountability and support for his daughter. But deep down, he recognized that this wasn't just another school issue, it was a reflection of his own struggle to balance life, his job, and parenthood. "Thank you for informing me," he said, forcing calmness into his voice. "Can you let Emily know I'm on my way?" As he hung up, the weight of his dual responsibilities pressed heavily on him. He had just rallied his team to believe in a brighter future, modeling strength and courage, yet here he was, flailing to manage the emotional turbulence of his own family. What kind of leader was he? He glanced around the conference room, somewhat surreal now in its aftermath of heated discussion, as if the world outside had rematerialized into focus. Gerald's questions lingered in the air, transformed. John realized that he wouldn't just have to advocate for his team but also needed to extend that philosophy to his daughter. He couldn't afford to lead with anything less than authenticity and heart. "I'm sorry, everyone. I need to step out," he said with an unexpected conviction, breaking through the tension. "Emily needs me." John bolted from the room, each step echoing a newfound clarity. The office was a labyrinth of responsibilities, but he felt lighter. The pressing fears of an unfinished meeting morphed into a powerful determination to be present for Emily. The development plans could wait. As a father, it was essential to show her that he would always fight for her, just as he had fought for his employees. On his ride to the school, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. This was more than about being a father, it was a transformative moment that bridged his professional ideals with personal stakes. He couldn't advocate for resilience in the workplace without demonstrating it within his own family. John realized that both spheres demanded the same courage, the same integrity. Arriving at school, he was directed to the nurse's office. Emily sat cross-legged on the examination table, her eyes puffy and red. He knelt beside her, not knowing what to say, feeling woefully inadequate to soothe her distress. Maybe it wasn't about having the perfect solutions, but just the act of being there for her that counted the most. "What's the matter?" he asked softly, taking her small hand in his. I just felt alone," she replied, her voice quivering. Breaking his heart, John recognized that her pain was a mirror to his own. "You're never alone, Emily. I'm always here, even when it feels hard." In this raw moment, John tasted the richness of vulnerability. It wouldn't solve his daughter's troubles at school, but he had established a new layer of connection, one built on trust and understanding. After they left the school, John sat in the car, contemplating how to navigate the next steps. Emily needed tools to handle her emotions effectively, just as he needed to equip his team to deal with the upheaval at work. He drove home, pondering how best to integrate these valuable lessons from both his personal and professional life. As he pulled into the driveway, inspiration struck. Could he create a program that empowered both his daughter and his employees to grow from their challenges? A space for resilience and emotional intelligence, but that would mean facing not only his fears but also Gerald's impending pushback. He turned off the engine, anticipation swelling in his chest. He would need to unify those lessons and pitch one final idea during the next meeting, one that would demand support from more than just his leadership team. They would have to embrace change together, for both employees and families alike. He hadn't seen it before, but now it shimmered on the horizon. The ultimate test of his leadership awaited. Would he rise to the occasion, or buckle under the pressure? John's mind raced with possibilities as he walked through the door, the weight of his dual roles heavy on his shoulders. The remnants of the day's events flickered in the background, the echoes of Emily's quiet confession sprawled across his thoughts. He could no longer see his responsibilities as binary father or leader. They were interwoven, tightly knit in a fabric that demanded both his time and attention. A sense of urgency propelled him to gather his ideas and devise a plan. He paced the living room, his eyes scanning the walls lined with family photos that captured fleeting moments of laughter and joy. This was his foundation, yet it felt strangely distant, as if he were an outsider in his own home. John realized that his leadership had to expand beyond the corporate realm, touching his family life with the same passion. What if I created a workshop at work, focused on emotional resilience? He whispered to the empty room. The idea gained momentum, morphing and evolving. If he could equip his team with emotional tools, he could directly impact the workplace culture, fostering an environment where support and understanding flourished, an atmosphere mirroring the open communication he yearned for with Emily. He paused, considering how to bridge the gap between an office dynamic and a parenting approach. Speaking with Emily felt critical to this journey. She was, after all, the first person who needed his guidance through early social challenges. Tonight, he decided firmly, I'm going to ask her about what she needs. The thought fueled a fire in his chest. Not only would he be a father championing his daughter, but he would also pilot a transformative journey that would benefit his colleagues. As night fell and they settled into the living room, John turned toward Emily, who was curled up on the couch with a blanket, an array of Lego pieces spread out around her. Momentarily, he appreciated the comfort of shared space before his heart tugged him to address the deeper issue. Hey, Em? Can we talk for a minute? He asked, his tone gentle yet direct. She looked up, her eyes reflecting uncertainty. Sure, Dad. Today was tough at school, right? He leaned in, ready to listen. What do you think would help if something like this happens again? Emily hesitated, her expression a blend of reluctance and thoughtfulness. I don't know. I don't want to feel like I'm alone. I felt like nobody wanted to play with me. John inhaled sharply, the weight of her experience thrumming inside him. And that's important to talk about. I want to make sure you feel supported, not only at school but everywhere, like at home or with friends. What do you mean? She tilted her head, intrigued. I want to create a workshop at my work to help people, including dads like me. I want to build emotional resilience. Emily scrunched her nose in thought. What does that mean? It's about learning how to handle feelings, together, like how you and I talked after school today. I think if I can help adults understand these things, like feeling alone, it will help others feel supported too. As her eyes brightened with understanding, John detected a shift in Emily. Conversations about resilience weren't merely adult talk, they embodied innate wisdom she'd carry into her social interactions. They could both learn from each other. But Dad, she ventured, her voice steady, what if the other kids don't want to talk about feelings? What if they think it's silly? Her question hung in the air, stirring doubt within John. Well, maybe some might think that way. But you and I know how important it is to be heard. What if we could show them it's okay? Maybe Emily considered, her brow furrowing as she chewed the idea. Could I help you? John felt an unexpected surge of pride. Of course. In fact, your perspective might be the key, he said with enthusiasm. The thought of their collaboration felt exhilarating. This intersection of their experiences ignited a deeper bond and pushed John closer to the path he had envisioned. Settling back against the couch, John felt the embers of possibility roiling into resolute determination. He could inspire change that rippled from his personal life to his professional landscape. As the night drew to a close, shadows settled lightly in the room, punctuated only by the faint glow of the TV. Inspiration coursed through him, battling the undercurrents of uncertainty. What if he dared to share his and Emily's journey with his team? To pave the way for others, an invitation to embrace vulnerability as strength. The moment beckoned for courage, and as doubt tried to creep in, John shut it down. Tomorrow was the day to announce his plans in the meeting and confront Gerald's skepticism head-on. His heart raced with anticipation, and as he glanced at Emily, immersed in her toys, he couldn't help but wonder, would this venture not only reshape their lives but also ignite a powerful movement within his company? The stakes had never felt higher, but perhaps the greatest leap lay ahead, just waiting for him to tackle it head-on. Tomorrow, he would summon the strength to lead with both heart and purpose. But when he walked into that meeting, would his vision resonate, or would it falter under scrutiny? The morning sun cast stripes of light across John's office as he prepared for the meeting. He stood at the window, momentarily transfixed by the view of the city below, a blend of chaos and beauty, much like the duality of his current life. He adjusted his tie, trying to shake off the nerves that tingled in his stomach. Today was not just another Wednesday, it felt monumental, a stepping stone toward redefining not only his approach to leadership but also his role as a father. His thoughts turned to Emily. The courage she displayed by sharing her feelings had sparked a transformative idea, and that was the foundation he needed to build upon. He could sense a shift in her demeanor, a resilience budding within her. John wondered if he had the same fortitude waiting to break through. Would he rise to the occasion? As he walked towards the conference room, the echo of his footsteps reverberated in the hallway. Each step was a reminder of the countless meetings where conventionality reigned, where discussions were transactional, and feelings were often stifled. Today, John intended to break the mold. It was a gamble, but he was willing to risk his comfort for the sake of progress. He entered the conference room, greeted by the usual ambivalence from Gerald and the others. Their faces held skepticism, arms crossed, an unspoken challenge hanging in the air. Thanks for coming, everyone. His voice was steady, but the weight of their stares bore heavily upon him. I wanted to discuss something that extends beyond our usual metrics. I believe it's time to focus on emotional resilience in the workplace. John launched into his vision, weaving in Emily's insights, highlighting the importance of mental health and support systems. He sensed hesitation and disbelief simmering, particularly from Gerald, whose furrowed brow deepened as John spoke. "Are you seriously suggesting that we hold workshops on feelings?" Gerald interjected, his tone dripping with disdain. "This is a business, not a therapy session." Each word from Gerald felt like a trigger, igniting uncertainty within John. Did he really believe in this mission, or was he merely grasping at straws? He took a breath, recalibrating his thoughts. Vulnerability was not weakness, it was strength, a lesson he intended to impart. "Actually, Gerald, I think we underestimate the power of emotional support in driving productivity," John countered, quiet conviction filling his voice. "If we allow ourselves to understand and express our emotions, we become more engaged, collaborative, and innovative. Isn't that what we want for our company?" Gerald's gaze hardened, but John pressed on, pouring energy into his argument. He offered statistics about workplaces that thrive due to supportive cultures. Their importance extended beyond the corporate walls into personal lives, just as he had seen with Emily. That realization was the lifeblood funding his conviction. The room was silent, the weight of contention hanging thickly overhead. John stole glances at his colleagues, searching for signs of agreement, of the flickering lights of understanding. He felt drenched in vulnerability, exposing not just his plan but a corner of his spirit. Finally, Jane, a soft-spoken analyst, cleared her throat, a small yet fierce defiance glimmering in her eyes. "I think it's worth discussing. People want to feel validated. Maybe we have been blind to the emotional needs around us." John's heart soared, a brief spark of hope igniting. Perhaps, just perhaps, this was the moment where change began. He continued to engage in dialogue, welcoming questions and addressing doubts with sincerity. The atmosphere shifted, a collaborative energy began weaving through the room. As the meeting drew to a close, John's spirit felt lightened by acknowledgement, yet shadows of doubt still lurked in corners of his mind. What if this wasn't enough? Their commitment to emotional well-being was a long road ahead, and John could feel uncertainty like a tether tightening. What if they backed out? What if he faced resistance from others beyond Gerald? These were hurdles he had to reckon with. Stepping out of the conference room, John realized the fight had only just begun. This was about more than professional growth, it was a pathway into deeper relationships both at work and at home. As he glanced at his reflection in the glass of the elevator doors, a question loomed larger than the justified hesitations. Could he fully embrace the vulnerability required to sustain this change? Tomorrow, he would confront not only Gerald's skepticism but his own deeply rooted fears. A clearer path ahead was forming, yet it challenged everything he had known about leadership. In this pursuit of emotional connection, would he find himself at his most authentic, or would the weight of expectations bury his aspirations whole? As sunlight filtered through his office window the next day, John sat at his desk staring at a blank page, the remnants of yesterday's meeting swirling in his mind. Each critique from Gerald echoed like a persistent drumbeat, challenging him to fortify his resolve. He knew he had made some inroads with Jane's support, but the rest of the team remained largely unconvinced, and that weighed heavily on him. His fingers traced the edge of his notebook, a comforting habit that preceded significant thought. He questioned how he could articulate the need for emotional resilience beyond mere rhetoric. How could he effectively convey its urgency while navigating the corporate skepticism that still lingered? John recalled the vulnerability he'd felt during his pitch. Yes, it had nudged him forward into a realm of leadership he'd never fully embraced, but he couldn't ignore the gnawing doubt that lodged within him. Was he truly the right person to lead this initiative, or was he merely a man in search of redemption for past failures in both the boardroom and at home? Compelled to act, he decided to reach out to Emily first. Their conversation had unveiled a new layer of emotional intelligence that he realized he had previously overlooked, not only with her but with his team as well. He dialed her number, fingers trembling slightly as the phone rang. "Hey, Dad," she answered cheerfully, her voice a comforting balm to his self-doubt. "Emily, can we talk?" he asked, his voice thick with purpose. Of course. Everything okay? He hesitated, reeling from her concern. It was invigorating yet challenging to reframe the common father-daughter dynamic into one of mutual respect and collaboration. Actually, I was hoping you could help me with something important. What is it? She asked, curiosity piquing. I'm planning another meeting, a follow-up on emotional well-being. I thought, maybe you could share your thoughts on what really makes people feel valued and heard. Her silence stretched longer than he anticipated, filled with the weight of consideration. Dad, you mean you'd actually want to hear what I think? Yes. I think I need your voice in this as much as mine, he affirmed, feeling a twinge of relief. I would love that. I have so many ideas. As they plotted the upcoming dialogue between generations, John felt a surge of clarity. Emily's insights aligned with his vision, and he recognized an opportunity to approach the meeting more informally, creating a less intimidating space for his colleagues. Incorporating her youthful perspective could disarm the prevailing cynicism. In preparation for this new collaborative attempt, he began to draft his presentation materials, focusing on personal anecdotes rather than sterile statistics. Each story he jotted down revealed layers of himself he had long neglected: his failures, triumphs, and the moments that had shaped him as both a leader and a father. The office atmosphere felt different as he entered the conference room again. There was a palpable tension, an unspoken challenge loomed, yet John felt steadier. This time, he wasn't just a man selling an idea, he was someone seeking to facilitate a deeper connection. Today, I want to share something personal, he started, surprising his audience. He recounted a moment with Emily that changed his view on communication and vulnerability. The office buzz faded, replaced by an attentiveness that had previously seemed impossible to achieve, and then, the inevitable happened. A sharp voice cut through the air. Gerald S. Are you really trying to get personal in a work setting? His skepticism sharpened, aimed like a dagger at John's conviction. John squared his shoulders, confronting Gerald's challenge head-on. Did he truly care more about appearances than the emotional bonds that could drive their team forward? Yes, I am. Because vulnerability invites trust and authenticity, two things we desperately need to cultivate here. My daughter and I have learned that we can confront challenges and emerge stronger. But would his words resonate or further alienate? The tension escalated, fueling an internal struggle. Would he back down or further expose his vulnerability? The thought of stepping into this uncomfortable territory both terrified and invigorated him. As the silence hung, vibrating with expectation, John realized he stood at the precipice of something significant, a threshold between fear and possibility. Would he step forward into the light of connection, or fall back into the shadows of doubt? Each heartbeat echoed a question that grew louder: was he ready to face the truth of their emotional landscape? Determined, he took a deep breath, embracing the moment as he prepared to dive deeper into this uncharted territory. The silence was almost unbearable. John could feel the weight of the room pressing down on him, and as he looked at the faces around the table, he noted the myriad reactions: some interested, others skeptical, and few openly hostile. Gerald's challenge had thrown down the gauntlet, and John understood he had a choice to make: respond defensively or lean into the vulnerability that had brought him this far. With his heart racing, he took a step closer to the table, the palpable energy of the team amplifying his need to connect. I get it, he began, conscious of tilting the dynamic in his favor. Sharing personal experiences in a professional setting can feel uncomfortable. It's vulnerable territory. But I believe that discomfort is precisely where we can find growth. Gerald's scowl deepened, but John seized the moment. He referenced a specific project from last year that had gone awry, detailing how he had led his team through that failure. He shared the raw emotions he had felt: fear, anxiety, and a sense of inadequacy. How his tactical approaches had faltered under pressure, and that it was only through open conversations with Emily that he had managed to muster the perspective to rise again. Somehow, these moments are where strength is born, he continued, gauging the room's reactions. I know it's easy to dismiss personal anecdotes as irrelevant, but they tie directly to our ability to innovate and collaborate effectively. When we know we're heard and valued, we're empowered. My daughter has shown me the power of that realization. Gradually, he noticed nods of agreement emerge, small gestures that hinted at a softening climate. Yet, the battle was far from over. Gerald still looked skeptical, arms crossed defiantly. John pivoted his energy, turning his focus outward. Let me ask you all something. How many of you have experiences where a simple acknowledgement transformed your view of a situation or relationship? A brave soul from the back, Lisa, offered a hesitant yet insightful story about a time she felt overlooked during a key decision. The floodgates opened, and others began to share their own moments of revelation and vulnerability. It was in this exchange that John felt the winsomeness of the new paradigm he was trying to establish, each story threading through the fabric of the meeting, weaving a tapestry of enhanced emotional connectivity. Yet Gerald, anger simmering just below the surface, interrupted again, but getting personal might not yield results. Isn't this all a bit too touchy-feely? The juxtaposition of Gerald's cold skepticism against the warmth building in the room created a stark contrast. This time, John's resolve crystallized. Touchy-feely or not, relationships drive results. Trust isn't something we can quantify, but it's part of our competitive edge. The strongest teams are those that function on mutual respect and understanding. Everyone leaned in as John laid out his vision, still critical of the thought that perhaps they had tipped into uncharted territory. There was no turning back. He felt the shift, the hesitation, the acceptance, the burgeoning camaraderie forming among them. As he closed the session, he realized that this journey would be an ongoing one, filled with both resistance and support. Transformation wasn't immediate, it was a process. But one truth glimmered above all: he had started to cultivate an environment of dialogue, openness, and resilience. The meeting concluded, and as his colleagues filed out, John felt the familiar pang of self-doubt rear its head. Had he genuinely made progress, or was it simply a fleeting moment of vulnerability? He had opened up, yes, but would it sustain beyond their shared experiences? Stepping out of the conference room, he bumped into Jane in the hall, a knowing smile lighting up her face. "You're onto something, John. Keep going," she encouraged, and that flicker of confidence surged through him once more. But deep inside, as he returned to his office, another question loomed larger than ever: was he prepared for the backlash that could follow? The journey had begun, yet what awaited him next would test this newfound connection in ways he never anticipated. Would they embrace the daunting challenge of fostering true emotional resilience, or would old habits and skepticism threaten to pull them back into the shadows? John settled into his chair, staring blankly at the spreadsheets on his computer screen, the usual numbers and metrics failing to register in his mind. The echoes of the meeting still reverberated in his thoughts. Had he truly initiated a shift in perspective, or was the resonance just temporary, an emotional wave that would soon recede? He rubbed his temples, uncertain if he was battling fatigue or apprehension. That he needed more than reassurance, he needed a strategy. In moments of discomfort, John recognized a familiar impulse to dive deeper into his own limitations. Would his past management styles hold up against the evolution he sought to foster? The mere thought made him wince. Confronting emotional vulnerability both excited and terrified him. Determined, he pulled out a notebook where he jotted down key insights, underlining parts of the challenging dialogues he'd just navigated. Each word he scribbled served not merely as a record, but as a reminder of a powerful lesson learned, one he would not allow to dissipate. He had to reinforce this nascent culture rather than let it slip through the cracks. But as he created a plan to address his team's potential reluctance to embrace change, images of Gerald's skeptical glare loomed large in his mind. John could hardly blame him. Change often implied risk. Still, the challenges they faced required a fundamental shift in how they communicated and functioned. His heart raced again at the idea of standing up to Gerald once more. Would his conviction withstand the kind of interrogation that Gerald favored? He took a deep breath. Each confrontation offered him a chance for growth, a moment to mold the narrative rather than be shaped by it. He realized he needed to invite an open dialogue about change that would involve Gerald directly. Clarity in intentions might strip away some of the defensiveness. Making a mental note to reach out to Gerald that evening, he shuffled through his folders. One particular document caught his eye: the results from their previous project. John had been reminded again and again that data-driven reports did not tell the whole story. However, seeing the figures marked on paper, coupled with the faces of those who had labored tirelessly, invoked feelings of empathy. What if he framed the next conversation around not just the numbers but the experiences and challenges the team navigated to reach those results? By attacking the problem collaboratively, rather than taking on an adversarial position, perhaps he could change the whole atmosphere of their next meeting. He began drafting an email, taking care to balance the hard data with narratives that would highlight the personal stakes of their collective work. Before he could press send, Jane appeared in his doorway. "Hey, I've been thinking about what we talked about earlier. It's essential that you stay true to yourself," she said, her eyes twinkling with sincerity. Her words landed like raindrops in a drought. "I need that reminder. It's challenging to erase old habits of leadership that don't serve our purpose anymore," John admitted. "What about bringing in a few stories from the past successes? Something authentic to bridge the gap. Emphasizing what the team learned, the growth that came during tough times?" "Exactly. I want to show them how all those experiences got us to this point. People connect with stories, not just numbers. I'll focus on that." Motivated by their conversation, he sent the now refined email to Gerald, detailing his proposed approach for the upcoming meeting, but as he closed his laptop and looked out the office window, a looming shadow dipped into his thoughts. Gerald might not respond positively. After all, confronting a mindset sharpened by years of skepticism would be no small feat. The stakes were high. Could he really convince not just Gerald but the entire team that vulnerability was vital for innovation? John felt the pulse of uncertainty quicken within him, yet he also sensed a flicker of purpose igniting. He could choose to step forward or retreat, and the simple act of reaching out felt innately heroic. The days ahead would undoubtedly reveal whether his leap into emotional resilience could prevail amidst the weight of skepticism. Would he inspire his team to embrace real change together, or would the crucible of resistance extinguish his flame? As he contemplated the forthcoming meeting, clarity hit him like a thunderbolt. The time had come to face Gerald not as a foe, but as an ally and a piece of the puzzle in building a resilient team. Would they succeed in moving beyond mere numbers to a culture of growth, or would old habits reclaim their space? John emerged from the last meeting weighing both relief and curiosity. The discussion had ignited something within him, an undeniable urge to bridge the gap between personal philosophy and professional practice. His proposal had been met with mixed reactions, but one thing was clear: the seed of vulnerability he planted was beginning to sprout. The idea of creating an emotional resilience workshop and involving Emily was taking shape. The following week saw a transformation unfold, both within himself and his company. Energized by the connection with Emily and the tactile evidence of genuine engagement with his colleagues, John dove headfirst into his new initiatives. Every conversation became a chance to reinforce the culture of emotional intelligence he was fighting for. The once sterile hallways buzzed with discussions, laughter, and shared experiences. Employees were not merely numbers on spreadsheets, they were individuals with unique stories and aspirations. As he shaped the workshop content, John recalled the evening spent at home with Emily, sharing their thoughts on emotions and resilience. He drew upon those moments and began to weave them into the inaugural session with his team. The simple act of prioritizing collective strengths over fears was reverberating throughout the office. John felt a sense of accomplishment wash over him, one unlike anything he'd experienced in board meetings filled with hard metrics. The workshop took place in the cozy conference room, decorated with vibrant art pieces mirroring Sarah's influence. Attendees were welcomed not by charts or graphs, but by the calming presence of an open dialogue. John incorporated group activities designed to evoke reflection and elicit emotional expressions. Together, they shared stories about challenges, victories, and the apprehensions they all faced. The room shifted from workplace formality to a safe haven of authenticity and togetherness. Through the course of the next few months, tangible results emerged. Productivity levels increased, but more importantly, trust rebuilt itself within the team. Employees began taking risks and exchanging innovative ideas freely. John observed firsthand how a commitment to emotional wellness translated into more confident actions beyond the confines of their desks. They were becoming a cohesive unit, unified through shared understanding, not merely because of corporate mandates but due to a fundamental transformation in the relationships they forged. The real turning point came one afternoon when Jane approached him. With rare enthusiasm, she announced that the team had successfully secured an important client, one that had previously felt unreachable. The news rippled through John's heart, yet he felt more satisfied knowing that this success stemmed from the authentic collaboration fostered by the emotional toolkit they had cultivated together. Later that week, John received an unexpected email from Gerald, a long, contemplative message, acknowledging the positive changes he had observed within the company. With some hesitance, Gerald admitted that John's focus on emotional resilience had shifted the dynamics of the team in a way he had not anticipated. The tone was almost conciliatory, urging John to continue pursuing this new direction. The board meeting loomed on the horizon, a monumental opportunity to finally showcase the progress John had made. As he prepared his presentation, he reflected on how far he'd come from a CEO teetering on the edge of making ruthless corporate decisions to a leader championing authenticity and compassionate practices. When the day arrived, John felt the weight of expectation lift slightly as he entered the conference room. Though initial skepticism remained on the faces of some board members, there was a noticeable difference. Their experiences and stories were beginning to be valued. John led with an emotional narrative of the changes that had transpired within the company, how individuals had grown together and what it had meant for their collective success. The room buzzed with anticipation as he opened the floor for discussion. Voices that had once been hesitant now spoke up confidently, sharing their realizations and advocating for the work they'd accomplished together. A stunning transformation unfolded as spirited debates erupted over future directions, innovation, and the importance of cultivating a workplace culture grounded in empathy. Finally, as the meeting came to a close, it was a clear victory, not merely a professional achievement, but a triumph of spirit and character. John's heart swelled with pride knowing that both his personal and professional lives had blossomed through this arduous journey. He no longer sought validation in titles or profits. Instead, he stood solidly in his identity as both a caring father and a compassionate leader. The echoes of laughter at home with Emily, the collaborations at work, and the time spent nurturing genuine relationships filled him with a fulfillment he'd longed to capture. In facing his fears, John had conquered not only the conflicts within the boardroom but within himself. This was his achievement, a profound sense of self and the creation of a workspace that honored emotional intelligence as a cornerstone of success. The dichotomy he once experienced as CEO and father had transformed into a harmonious symphony of both roles. Now, he turned to his supporters with renewed energy, knowing the true battle for change had just begun, but he was ready to lead on both fronts. The world was vast, and he needed to keep pushing forward without hesitation. Before the story ended, a voice in John's heart echoed urgently, this was the moment of transformation. Subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the next transformative stories filled with hope. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm and keep these journeys alive. Comment below your thoughts about John's journey and what it means to overcome personal obstacles. Share this story with at least 5 friends who need to see this victory. Don't wait even one more second to spread the word of courageous change.